December 16, 1773. Boston Harbor lies calm, but beneath the surface, a storm is brewing. Tonight, ordinary colonists will commit an act so bold it will echo through history and ignite a revolution. This is the story of the Boston Tea Party. Not just a protest, but the moment 13 colonies said enough to the most powerful empire on earth. By 1773, Britain controlled the largest empire in history. But ruling an empire costs money. The 7 Years' War had emptied British coffers, and Parliament looked to America to pay. And so began a series of acts. First came the Sugar Act, then the Stamp Act. Each new tax tightened Britain's grip. But the colonists had a rallying cry: no taxation without representation. And they meant it. On May 10, 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act. It wasn't just about tea, it was about control. The East India Company could now sell tea directly to America, bypassing colonial merchants. But why? Why did Britain bother with tea? What did a cup of tea have to do with empire? Everything. The East India Company was a monopoly, a single seller with complete control over the market. And the Tea Act gave them an advantage over colonial merchants. It was about demonstrating that Britain could impose order, that they could make laws and enforce them, even over great distances. They could tax the colonists because they could also protect them, theoretically at least. The reality was far more complicated. Colonial tea merchants faced ruin. Worse yet, the tax from earlier acts remained. This wasn't just taxation without representation. This was corporate monopoly backed by imperial force. And there was only one thing to do about it. Samuel Adams, the fiery organizer, called it tyranny. If Britain could give one company a monopoly on tea, what would stop them from controlling all colonial trade? To understand what happened next, we need to visit a place where ideas were born. A place that was central to the American Revolution, the Green Dragon Tavern. There are many legends about the tavern, including that Paul Revere's famous midnight ride actually began here. But its most important role was bringing people together. In the back room sat members of the Sons of Liberty. They organized protests, wrote pamphlets, kept watch over the harbor, and led by Sam Adams, planned resistance. The Sons of Liberty weren't just protesters. They were revolutionaries in disguise. Britain didn't know who they were, which made them dangerous. There were thousands of them. They met in secret, organized through taverns and meeting houses. But their message spread quickly. Soon the whole city was buzzing with the same sentiment. Resist the Tea Act. News spread to New York and Philadelphia. In both cities, tea ships were turned away. But Boston was different. 3 ships sailed into Boston Harbor carrying 342 chests of East India Company tea. The Dartmouth, Eleanor, and Beaver. Their cargo was worth over 10,000 pounds, a fortune. For weeks, the ships sat in the harbor while tensions rose. The Sons of Liberty posted guards to prevent unloading. Governor Hutchinson refused to let the ships leave without paying duties. It was a standoff. And according to British law, if the tea wasn't unloaded and duties paid within 20 days, customs officials would seize it. That deadline was December 17th, one day away. On December 16th, 1773, 7,000 colonists, nearly half of Boston's population, packed into Sprue's Old South Meeting House. It was the largest political meeting in colonial history. The air inside was thick with anticipation. Every man knew what was at stake, what might happen next. Samuel Adams took the floor. His words were measured, but his meaning clear. This meeting can do nothing more to save the country. It was the signal everyone was waiting for. As if by magic, men began slipping out of the meeting house. Within minutes, they reappeared, transformed. War paint, feathers, blankets. They were Mohawk Indians now. The disguised colonists marched through Boston streets to wharf where the 3 ships sat. Their leader, some say it was Samuel Adams. Others claim it was merchant George Robert Twelves Hughes. Either way, the group split into 3. At the harbor, they boarded the ships. They had no weapons, no plans for violence. They weren't going to steal the cargo or set the ships on fire. They were making a political statement, not committing random vandalism. They would destroy the tea, not the ships. If the British wanted to seize the cargo, they would have to seize it from their hands. And so they went to work methodically. Chests were hauled up from shipholds, split open with hatchets, and dumped into Boston Harbor. 342 chests in total. It took 3 hours. Thousands of Bostonians lined the wharf, watching in silence. British Admiral Montagu's warships sat helplessly nearby. The crowd was too large, the protesters too organized. Nobody panicked. Nobody tried to stop them. When finished, the Indians swept the ships clean and replaced a broken padlock. Someone even returned tea found in a participant's shoe. This was precision, not chaos. On the morning after, dawn revealed Boston Harbor thick with tea leaves stretching for miles. The smell of tea would linger for weeks, but the real impact was just beginning to unfold. Within days, news spread across the colonies by horseback and ship. From Georgia to New Hampshire, Americans learned that Boston had struck a blow against British tyranny. In London, King George III was furious. Parliament was outraged. How dared these colonial rebels destroy private property and defy British authority? Punishment would be swift and severe. In 1774, Parliament passed the Coercive Acts. Americans called them the Intolerable Acts. Boston Harbor was closed. Massachusetts government was placed under direct British control. Other acts restricted town meetings and strengthened British military forces in America. But Britain miscalculated. Instead of isolating Boston, the harsh punishment united the colonies. Virginia sent rice. South Carolina sent money. The continent was awakening. On September 5, 1774, delegates from 12 colonies gathered in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. The Boston Tea Party had created something new: American unity. What started as a protest over tea had become something far greater. Colonial militias began training. Arms were stockpiled. Revolution was no longer a whispered word. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched to seize colonial weapons at Concord. At Lexington Green, the shot heard round the world was fired. The American Revolution had begun. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress declared independence. The document listed Britain's crimes against the colonies. High on the list, imposing taxes without consent. The Boston Tea Party proved that ordinary people could challenge the world's greatest empire. It showed that principles matter more than profit, that liberty is worth any risk. In those 3 hours on December 16, 1773, something uniquely American was born. The idea that government serves the people, not the other way around. Today, when we speak of American independence, we trace it back to many moments. But it all began in Boston Harbor, with tea leaves floating on dark water and the sound of freedom stirring. Thank you for watching.